Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Grant Cameron, and I have a very special interview today. I want to do a little short intro why I think this interview is so important. My career in UFOs has gone from one subject to another, and I just sort of let it go. And I sort of get on the right road, and I go down one road and then another road. And this is the latest road I'm on. I think this is one of the most important subjects there is. I have done two previous interviews about what we're going to talk about today. My guests today are Rob Freeman and Wendy Gallant, who are working on something that I desperately want to know how it works. And this has to do with being able to see without your eyes. And I got onto this maybe 6 months ago. And I think it's important because I'll give you an example. There's a study that's just been done, and I believe it was Bruce Grayson and David Huffer, I think his name is, who have done a study that showed that in the U.S. military veterans, 50% of all of these veterans have had a near-death experience. And I know in the free survey, Edgar Mitchell free survey, with UFO experiences, it's 37% have had a near-death experience. And so when I saw this, I realized this is very important, that what we basically have done with veterans, and according to the work that I've seen done, is that basically they just write them off as PTSD or bipolar, and they throw a bunch of drugs at them, and then you have this very high suicide rate. And I think it's incumbent upon us to study near-death experiences, because it's very, very important as to how does reality actually work. And so when I saw this this whole thing with the blindfolds that we're going to talk about today, I know from my experience with Bob Emenegger, who was the guy who did the UFO documentary UFOs Past, Present, Future in 1975, that he had a conversations with Hal Puthoff. And Hal Puthoff had been with the CIA doing the remote viewing program, and that they had been over in China, and that they had been investigating these children in China who were doing telekinesis and were seeing through blindfolds. So it was a couple of months ago, I suddenly saw a couple of videos, one from England, and I did the interview with Nicola Farmer, who's doing the research there. And then we did the one with the people in Utah where they were doing it. I basically said, this is Nobel Prize. I mean, it's not, if it was a fair world, this would be Nobel Prize. It's not a fair world, so a lot of people still won't pay attention to this. But in a near-death experience, a lot of the sort of the rational analytical explanations are, well, the brain is still alive, and that's why this person is getting these impressions of being up in the corner of the room, and they can see and they can hear. But basically, when you are on an operating table, they tape your eyes shut so that you don't scratch your cornea. So whatever they want to say about the brain being alive or being dead, the eyes are closed. You cannot see. There's no way they can explain that. So when I saw the first videos that I saw of children and adults being able to see through blindfolds, going through obstacle courses, reading books and stuff like this, I said, this is near-death experience. They have duplicated whatever's going on with the near-death experience, how that person can hear and see when the brain is flatlined. This is what it is. And so that's why it's so extremely important to me that we view this research that Rob Freeman has. I found out through Sinead that Rob had been doing this. I said, Rob's doing this? And we had done a previous interview with Rob, and we were talking about ports and timelines and some weird experiences that he'd had doing his documentary film stuff. And so I said, wow. And the important thing about Rob and Wendy is that a lot of the people who are doing this research have got non-disclosure agreements. They will not tell you how this actually works. And I'm really not interested in circus. I'm not really interested in being able to do this or whatever. I just want to know, how does this work? Because it seems to tie into a big part of what reality is all about. So with that said, I want to welcome Rob and Wendy to talk to me about this. And I'm honored to talk to you and to find out, how does this actually work? Because you two have done a lot of work on this. And Rob, I think you were telling me you've actually been trained by 3 different people.
Yes, thanks for having me on the show here, Grant. both Wendy and I actually have been trained by 3 different people. It really started because, as you know, I've been researching out UFOs and ETs like you have. And I really felt that if somehow we can sharpen up some of our other senses, maybe we can, contact ETs telepathically through consciousness, different ways. And a good friend of mine, Leonie from Australia, we had met her on an expedition there. When I got back from Australia, she had sent me a video of her granddaughter with a blindfold on, reading and playing. And I thought, oh, Leonie's just playing a joke on me. This can't be real, right?
That's what everybody thinks. That's what everybody thinks when they first see it. It can't be real.
Leonie's a fun person, and she's always joking around. I had, oh, here's another one of her practical jokes. And I said, Leonie, is this for real? Is this a joke? And she actually said, this is for real. My granddaughter can read with her eyes closed, with a mask on. And I said, I want to do this.
But good for you. I'm glad you're doing it, because I think it's so extremely important as to giving us an idea of how does reality actually work? Because we sort of think, that we see through our eyes and ears and stuff, and then you see this and you says, well, no, we got something wrong here. We're making a mistake.
Yeah. And so what happened next was, we had been out looking at UFOs, Wendy and I, who's on the program with us here. And I was telling her about this. And Leonie told me that there's a lady in Ottawa that practices this, that teaches this. So we actually spent a weekend up there, and we learned very basically how to do it. And Grant, I've lost you here. I don't know if you're still on the call. Are you still on the call here?
You might have just left for a second.
Okay, so I'll keep talking. I'm in the rural area here. My internet connection is really not that great, so I never know if I'm just talking in the thin air. But we went to Ottawa. We learned basically how to do it, just to see colors, and we didn't have much success. One of the people in our group did. There was 4 of us, but the rest of us, especially Wendy and I, didn't really see much. I think I saw 1 color. So we started practicing after that. Wendy and I agreed that we would practice on our own, and we kind of learned the hard way. We were holding up colors. We were doing various different things. And I think at this point, Wendy, I'll let you talk and just describe a little bit of some of the things that we did.
Well, we would drive to each other's houses and wear the mask, of course. And we tried some of the different things that we were taught in Ottawa. And it was working. We were starting to see colors. Which was huge. We were starting to see, our first thing was seeing colors up close. Then as time went on, we started seeing colors out of the room. Rod would be in my living room. He'd start seeing colors in my entranceway here. And then we moved on to seeing colors. Rob did it one time outside. He put it in his car and drove away, and I was seeing colors as he was driving away. So, but we were doing all this on the fly, really, just trying to learn ourselves what to do. Then we decided to bring someone over from Romania and did that course also. We had a lot of people there. And we continued to see colors and that. We didn't really go much further, did we? Really?
No, we tried hard. I remember we had a few sessions. Wendy, you were the first to actually see characters.
Yes.
And letters, and it was
unbelievable.
Well, it was a little bit of an emotional experience for you because you couldn't believe what you were seeing.
Yeah, what actually happened is it just opened up for me all of a sudden. And it was emotional because when Rob would walk past me and he'd ask me what letter this is. And I remember distinctly the one day the letters started to just form for me. It wasn't like boom, it was there. It just started to form. And every time he walked by with a different card, the letters would start to form. So that was our first introduction to actually seeing letters and stuff.
Wow.
And I just want to mention here, Grant, at this point, I know that many people in the world believe that only children can do this.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of the trainers absolutely believe it 100%. Many of the trainers are adults and they cannot even do this themselves. Okay. I didn't believe that. I thought, what's the difference? Okay, you become older, but you still have the same brain. So I refused to believe that, and Wendy refused to believe it either. It was a long road for us to learn to see colors and to progress into seeing characters and letters and symbols. But the truth is, children can learn very easily. Like I've, taught my own niece in just a day. I mean, children even can do this spontaneously. And of course, their parents will tell them that they can't do this, but they can do it very quickly. It really, they're open to it. And it can be a consciousness thing. We don't know. I know that in some of the modes we learned, it was all about sending your consciousness, sending your energy out. And, Wendy can also speak to this, but we sometimes believe this is kind of like, it starts off as remote viewing for us as adults, and it turns into real-time remote viewing.
Yeah.
And that's why it really takes a lot of brain power. We just finished a 1-month-long course with Nikolai Denisov and Marina from Russia.
Okay.
Every day from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. And I guess it was Thursday, Wendy. My scene was really opening and I was reading characters and letters, and oh man, it was so tiring. I had to have an hour-long sleep in the afternoon. And that night, I was so dizzy. I was afraid to even get in my car and drive it. I just felt so spaced out. It taps into a part of the brain that we don't normally use. And it's interesting too, because I'll put up a different screen here in the back, but when we were learning, here's one here, they start off with symbols.
Okay.
And here's Wendy and I practicing. Wendy, we're doing it over Skype. Wendy's guiding me. I have my eyes closed. And she's asking me to go from different symbol to symbol, trace them out and say what they are. So you start out with very simple things to recognize shapes. It's almost like you're in a part of your brain that's never been used, and it doesn't know anything. And that part of the brain is like a child. And a child has to learn what shapes are. A child has to learn the letters, the numbers of the alphabet. And it's really a strange sensation. And Wendy can speak to this in a minute as well, because once you can practice these shapes, then you can start to recognize letters of the alphabet. The letters of the alphabet first appear as these shapes or similar to these shapes. And that's the only way you know them. So it's the strangest thing of having to teach yourself. You feel like you're a baby. Wendy, maybe you could speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, we had to draw out all the characters slowly with your eyes open and then close them, and then imagine and try to trace out the exact character with your eyes closed. And when you open your eyes, you're seeing, like when you look at it and you trace it out, you see it, but then when you close your eyes, you still see it. So you keep doing it, and then when you open your eyes, you see if you're still tracing out in the proper lines, which is teaching your brain that that is the character. And if you can keep the lines, keep your finger on the lines, it's like you're seeing with your eyes closed, if you keep doing that. And they keep working on that and working on that. And we eventually were able to just close our eyes and start tracing the characters and going right across the whole sheet with our eyes closed. So it was like training your eyes. And then we went on to letters, and we had to train our brain to recognize letters again. And then after that, we moved on to colors, shapes and colors, and we had to train to see the shapes and the colors. And it was very tiring. They said that we were basically growing neurons in our brain that we never used before. So every day, even though we were 2 hours, the two of us, they take turns. And sometimes I'd get really excited about it and I'd be training off camera. The worst thing you could do, because it is so exhausting. So when they tell you to rest, you rest because it is so exhausting. And at the end of the training session, you just go and you just want to sleep for an hour and a half. You just want to sleep. And they say that that's what you need to do because the next day you'll come in fresh and everything you learned the day before has been incorporated into your brain and you can move on. And but I found it totally exhausting. I think you did too, Rob, didn't you?
I did. I really did. And I found that, you know, there's different modalities here. And Wendy and I were very fortunate to have practiced or learned from 3 different people because they're totally different ways. So I don't say there's any real right and wrong way. It really is just training your brain. Anybody can do it from 0 to 90. I mean, it doesn't matter. The easiest thing we found, like Wendy and I kind of came at it from a different direction. We really got good with colors. And it crossed over into remote viewing, totally. It crossed over into remote viewing in other time periods. As Wendy says, I would get in the car and drive away with a color up on my dash. We had walkie-talkies. She would tell me the color. We even did once or twice, Wendy, where I placed a color. I think it was in my home here, and you were in Bayfield, where you live, an hour away. Yeah. And then I took the color away, Grant, for an hour. Then we talked, and I asked Wendy to go back into the time period an hour ago.
Wow.
And tell me what color I had on my desk, and she got it right. So it seems all of this is connected. It is, you know, it really is connected into consciousness. Like it's not your eyes that are seeing. Yeah. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like your brain is getting the information directly. It's not that you're seeing per se. It's like all this information is out there everywhere for all time. So it's like all information everywhere for all time periods, period. And then you're just training your brain to go and get a particular piece of information. Now, when you want to actually see something and read, you're asking your brain to get the piece of information that's on the page in front of you with your eyes closed or with your mask on. And your brain goes there, your consciousness goes there, and it sees it, it interprets it, and gives it to you. But that's just scratching the surface. Wendy, maybe you could describe some of the other things that are connected with this.
Well, I've had a few really unbelievable experiences happen to me since we started doing this. And the one just recently that is imprinted is when Rob and I were practicing across the computers, and he asked me what color he was holding. He didn't show it to me. He asked me what color he was holding. And he said, come into my house, walk up the stairs, go through my bedroom, into my bathroom, and into this quiet room, he calls it. And he said, I'm holding a colored sheet of paper and I'm walking across the room to the window, and the sun is on the window. And as he was describing that, I actually saw him walk across the room. I could describe exactly how he was walking across the room. And as soon as he said the sun's on the sheet of paper, I saw it hit the sheet of paper. And I said, you're holding an orange sheet of paper. And he said, yes, I am. But I physically, I was blown away. It wasn't, I've gotten colors, but the part I was blown away about is that I actually saw him walk across the room. I got really emotional that time also. It was like, wow, I actually saw this. So there's lots of things to this, because before we were doing this, I was playing with coins and I was playing with dice and stuff like that. And I got that I could tell what the dice is. I got that I could tell what the coin was, even though it was under my hand. Like I'd flip it, put it under my hand. I actually saw a coin one time. The actual whole coin appeared. Like it was a coin that was totally different than I normally use. And it was very distinctive with a bird's wing come up. And I saw the whole, even though it was under my hand, I saw the whole image of the coin. So there's just so many things attached to this that you can go on and on and on about it. So, yeah.
Exactly. And as we ended our session on Friday with Nicolay and Marina, they got into some of the things that they do and practice and teach people. And he went on to say that this seeing without eyes, that you don't need light to do it. Like, for example, you can be in a totally darkened room, Grant, with not a speck of light, and
Yeah.
you can read what's on the page. And I said, I want to do that. And Wendy asked me, why do I want to do that? And I said, well, I want to be able to see where the ETs are in the dark when I'm looking up at the sky.
That was one of the things I asked the Utah people, because there's always this thing about the skeptics saying, no, you're peaking. And I said to him, I said, well, have you ever tried? And maybe you can do that. I don't know if you're doing a documentary on this, but you try, like if you're going to read cards or something, you do it in the dark and get infrared cameras or turn the lights on, off, whatever. And then how does a skeptic then say that you're reading the cards in the dark? You can't be peaking. I think that's significant, that there's so many potentials of where you can go to prove so many things that will get into time and space and how consciousness actually works. That's I hope you do that. Do the dark thing where you show this stuff in the dark, where people are able to do it, and it's got nothing to do with peaking and seeing and stuff like that.
Exactly, I will, Grant. Now listen to this one. Wendy had an interesting thing happen when she was practicing. She was a little bit annoyed by it, but Nikolai said, no, this is a good thing. We can save this for later. Wendy has Zoom vision. Okay, with her, this special eyesight, with this special seeing directly from your brain, she was tracing the letters with her eyes closed, and then the letter, Wendy, why don't you describe it? What was happening?
Well, he was taking us to smaller and smaller print as we were progressing. And when he took me to a magazine, my first impression was, oh my gosh, that is so small. And as I said that, I'm trying to see it. I'm trying to see the letters. And as I said, wow, this is so small, the letters started coming out huge. Like it was a tiny, tiny little H, say, and it was coming out in huge, huge letters. And I said, I can't believe that I'm seeing this. And he said, well, that's a good thing. He told me it's a really good thing to magnify it. But he never, he said that, and I actually saw one time that it actually was tiny at one time, but I seem to magnify stuff. So it was pretty incredible too.
There's a crossover to that. And I noticed that as well, is if you've studied Dr. Michael Newton, the life between lives thing, where you see this with people who are under hypnosis with this real time, the ability to see things that they didn't see when it first happened. Like, for example, Sherry Wild talks about she was blown away when she was being regressed when they stopped her on the road. And then the regressionist says, well, what time is it? And she said, I don't know. I didn't look at my watch. And he said, well, look at your watch. And she said, I looked at my watch. I couldn't believe it. And then he said, what street are you on? And she says, I don't know. I mean, I didn't pay attention. He said, well, take a look. And she actually, in her vision, went and looked. The same as Michael Newton. There's this thing where people are in the afterlife where they're in front of this council and they've got these medallions around them and they have this writing on the medallion. And he says, well, what's the medallion saying? And the person says, I can't see it. And he says, well, go closer and look. And the person goes, oh, okay, I can see it now. It's almost that thing where it's beyond the vision. It's almost into the whole paranormal, how things actually work. You can move around and stuff. I mean, that's fascinating because you see that in the spirit world as well, that description of when your mind wants to zoom in on something, it actually does it.
Yeah.
It was very interesting, Grant. And so those are the two things that as we progress with this, and Wendy and I practice every day, like literally Monday to Friday,
Wow.
What I want to do is learn to seeing in the dark, and I want to learn the Zoom. Now, I've already had some experiences with Zoom, not just the Zoom call that we're on, but I mean zooming in on something. I had my letters got big all of a sudden. Now, he asked me why I wanted to have that, and I said, well, once again, if we're out on an expedition and it's dark, and I have all my cameras set up, and it has Zoom cameras on there as well. But if I see something in the sky, it would be pretty neat if you could use those two faculties, seeing in the dark and Zoom, and you could look in the windows. And you could see, okay, this is a plane. This is a conventional plane. No, this one here, this is a legitimate ET craft.
Yeah.
So you can train your brain to do these things. It's almost like you have this computer that's fresh and green, and you can train it to do whatever you want. But if you don't train it, it's like a drunken soldier, Grant. In other words, it'll just wander all over the place.
Yeah.
You've got to actually, like a kid in school, you've got to train him. You've got to sit it down. He's got to be sitting at his desk, pay attention to the teacher, and you got to keep the kid, you got to keep this student on track. Because a prime example that we first learned about that was when Wendy and I were at her place seeing the colors. And this part of the brain gets bored very easily. It's like it needs interesting things. And Wendy, you tell the story.
Well, I'm not sure which story you're going to tell, but
the one where you know, the other room.
Oh yeah, that was actually really funny. Your brain does get really bored really fast, and actually Nikolai Denisov says that too, because he would change it up really quickly. Because once you start, it'll go bang bang bang. You'll see stuff, and then all of a sudden it get bored. So he'll switch it up to something else, or then he'll switch it up to colors. And we were practicing, and we were doing colors almost like well, then we were doing that 2-3 times a week, but we were doing colors every day. And I'll never forget this. I was sitting there, and Rob comes out with this color, and this seriously what happened. My vision just went into the other room. Like literally, it was like it just came out of my head and it went into that other room.
Yep.
And at that point in time, and I looked at Rob and I was like, and I'm wearing my mask, and I went, I can't see anything you're doing, but I'm over there. So he went in and just ran with it, went in and started pulling colors up and setting them on my couch in the other room. And I was getting them bang, bang. It was just bored with doing the same thing that we were doing over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah, that crosses over again with the near-death experience thing, where people are suddenly they're in the operating room, and suddenly they're in the room where their kids or their parents are crying and stuff like that, where it's almost like to me, it doesn't seem to be brain, it seems to be consciousness, that the consciousness is separate from the brain. The brain is part of the like sender receiver, but the consciousness is what's actually moving around.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Grant, because how is it possible you can go into another room? Like, we made sure, for example, in the case of that, where I had the colors on the couch, I made sure where Wendy was sitting that the wall was blocking her. In other words, I looked, there was no way that even if she was peeking under her mask, which she didn't do, but just say she did, that there wasn't a direct line view over to the couch. So I was holding the colors not only in another room, but there was a wall between, like it was out of view, even if she had her eyes open, and she was banging them off one after the other. How is that possible? It is like your consciousness goes into another place.
Yeah, and plus you've got the thing where you're talking about time and space, where you can actually move to a different timeline and see it. It's like so it can't be brain, because brain will be in the 3D time and space. Consciousness can move, it's non-local, it can move to wherever it wants and to whatever timeline. Almost like Russell Targ said, it's as easy to remote view in the past and the future as it is in the present time.
And Nikolai says the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes, and Grant, it's almost like your brain itself is like a dumb terminal, a dumb terminal, and all this information out there is the internet.
Yeah.
And therefore, your dumb terminal, you can attach to the internet and you can go anywhere. So it's like your brain, with your consciousness ability that it has, you can go anywhere you want, anywhere in the universe that you want. But once again, it has to be trained. It's like of the billions of possibilities, you've got to give it direction. It's like saying, well, I could go in my car and I could go a million places today. Well, you don't. You've got to say, okay, I need to drive into town. And then your whole brain starts working around that. But you have an infinite number of possibilities, but you have to direct it. So it's the same with all this stuff. It'll wander around and play all by itself, and it'll come out at different times too when you're not even wanting to do this. But you've actually, if you want to do something with it, you got to train it and you got to direct it. You do have to focus it and tell it, this part of your brain, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to bend a spoon? Do you want to move objects? Do you want to see in the past? Do you want to remote view in real time? You want to see in the dark? What do you want to do? There's billions of possibilities, so you do have to focus it.
And,
I
and
find, yeah, I
go
find
ahead.
sometimes that it just opens up. It'll just, like sometimes it'll just open up and I'll see the room and then it'll close. Or when I was working with Nikolai, we were working with colors and he was doing a training, the circles with the color, and I was doing the training and then all of a sudden it opened up and I saw everything. Then it closed. And I've seen the same thing when Rob and I were practicing one night, or I was here practicing and we were training and I could see my fingers. I could see this emblems and stuff, and I was getting really excited and I turned around and picked up the sheet beside me. I could see my whole hand and I could see the whole sheet like in real time. And I was like, wow, you know, and then all of a sudden it was gone again. So I think a lot of it is the training. I said to Nikolai, how do I keep it open? How do I make it, you know, stable? So, yeah, but it's and just incredible when it happens, just incredible.
Where did the Russians get a hold of this? Because it sounds like they're pretty advanced in the training they do. So where did they pick it up from?
Okay, so you know, there's many different people doing this around the world, and a lot of them are kind of in their own little bubble.
Yeah.
Some of them believe that they were the ones that actually originated this.
Yeah.
But this has been going on for a long time. Like Helen Keller herself did this. There's accounts on the internet of her assistant, and they were doing this. They were dabbling in this a little bit. There's accounts going back into the 16 and 1700s. Like, as long as people have been around, they've been able to do it, Grant.
Yeah.
Like, I even wonder if it started from our, you know, caveman days where, you know, there's no moon, it's pitch black, and, you know, the family has to protect themselves, and there's a danger coming, it's pitch black. They have to be able to see. So perhaps we have it in our bodies as a result of need when, you know, way back in our evolution when your own life was at stake.
Yeah.
And perhaps everybody practiced it then. You know, it was just a normal sense that you had, just like, you know, touch, taste, feel, seeing, hearing, you know, no different than that, except that, you know, in modern day society, we don't really know about it. And so if a child does it spontaneously, probably the mother and father discourage it and think it's something paranormal or something anti-religious, and, you know, don't do it, close it off. But it's a normal thing that everybody's had. Now, I know that Nikolai in Russia, he was fascinated by this, and he visited many people all around Russia who were masters around different aspects of this. Wendy, do you remember any of that, what he said?
I can't remember where he went. I remember, didn't he go to the Philippines too? He was training all over. He's been doing it for like 30 years, I think.
Yeah, the Indonesians were doing it a long time ago with the military. That's where the Utah people picked it up.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, he, you know, at the very beginning, they gave us some of the history. Now I'm remembering. And how they teach it for their army is they will choose guys and gals who, how would I put it? Maybe they go through various tests. So they're kind of their elite people who are prepared to go through almost anything because they get special treatment if they make it through. They get special status. So what they would do is remember, Wendy, they would lock them in a room.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
With no light, either with no light or no food. Do you remember the story?
Both, no light or no food. In order to get food, they had to tell them what was on the wall. Was that what it was? They had to tell them what was on the wall, but it was pitch black.
Something like that. So it really forced your vision to come forward. You're seeing. And Grant, I've got a really cute story around this. Wendy will laugh because we were having trouble when we were practicing maybe a year ago. And I thought about this idea. I thought when there's need involved, a necessity, the brain will come through and help you. Right? It's like if there's a car accident in front, your subconscious brain makes you grab the steering wheel and steer around it without you even thinking, because there's a need, there's a necessity, there's a danger, whatever. So I said, Wendy, I'm not going to eat breakfast tomorrow. You make she made like a little burrito thing, I guess.
A wrap, yeah.
Wrap. And she had a big table there in her living room. And she placed it, she showed me what it looked like first. had it near me with my eyes open. Then I put the mask on, and she placed it in a different part of the table. And she said, Rob, you don't get to eat until you find your breakfast. And it's funny because I was looking all around on the table very carefully with my mask on. I couldn't smell it, it wasn't like that, but I was getting closer. And as I used my hand to kind of, it's kind of like the people with Vibravision, but I used it as a way to direct where I want it to be seen.
Yeah.
And my hand was getting very close to the food. And we got videos of this, of course. And Wendy's looking and she's getting all excited. He's going to get it. And I went to touch it. And of course, I thought, now, is this the correct place? So I moved my hand away to see if the image got stronger, because I was seeing the color of the burrito, right? And Wendy was aghast because she thought, oh my God, he's right on it. He's going to move away, right?
He was like,
but then I quickly moved my hand back. Yeah. I moved my hand back because then it got stronger again, and I just grabbed it with total confidence. I just grabbed it, and then I took my mask off, and I got to have my breakfast. So we actually did practice that idea of, if you need it to happen, it will be there. In other words, it's a part of your faculties of your brain that help you, and especially when there's urgent situations. It's kind of like me learning Spanish. I've been learning Spanish for a number of years, and in the classroom, it's kind of difficult when the teacher wants you to say things. Yeah. But yet when I go out in the community and need to buy something or take a taxi, order things, whatever with people, all of a sudden my level jumps up by a factor of 5 or more, because it's a necessity. I've got to do it. I'm right on the spot in the moment. It's like a gun to your head. You got to do it for fear of embarrassment or for fear of not being able to do what you got to do. Versus when you're in the classroom, it's kind of different. Your brain gets lazy in the classroom and it says, oh, this isn't real. I don't have to do it. But when you're in a real life situation, you're forced to do it, and all your brain power, even the parts that you have never been used, come alive. And so that's why they do it like this in the Indonesian army. And that's Nikolai witnessed all of that. That was one of the many things that he researched out. And then, he learned himself, and then he's been teaching people for a long time. There's other people in Russia. There's people in Germany. There's people in England. There's people in the States. There's people in Canada. So there's people all over the world teaching this.
Yeah, but you're doing the good part where you're trying to figure out how it works, rather than, because a lot of people they're making money, and that's fine. You're going to teach other people to do it, but to me, it's the what's behind it. Because you're mentioning this thing about the necessity. Destin and I just did the book Contact Modalities, and it fits into that, where basically you don't need to do this to survive, and so your brain goes to sleep. Everybody can do it, but it's not until you're forced. And we had stories in the Contact Modalities where we have the guy in the float tank, where he goes to the float tank and suddenly he opens up, or he fasts, then he goes to the float tank. And it's this kind of thing where you're forcing yourself to do things that you wouldn't, because the brain is very lazy. Like, we're very lazy, and if we don't need to do it, we lose the talent to do it, because we don't need to do it. But when you're forced to do it, so I'm glad you guys are doing the work on trying to figure out what's exactly going on, because then you can find out the potential. And one of the things I would like you to do the experiment, and it's done in the near-death experience, and they haven't had the success yet, where they have the little shelf above the operating table that has the word on top of the shelf, and nobody's seen it. But the problem is, when you're out of your body, when you're dying or whatever, that's the last thing you're going to do is look for the shelf. You don't even know it's there. And so that may be something where, because it looks like you're outside time and space, it looks like you're able to move the consciousness around. So that would be another experiment to see whether you can, hide an object up on a shelf, because that's one of the main experiments I've been doing for years, and I've never been able to prove that somebody can do that.
I'm sure we'd be able to do that. It's like when we were practicing at Wendy's, we got further and further away with this stuff, and we would put things over on her shelf. And,
oh, there you go.
I was required to go over there and tell me what's on the shelf. Tell me what color it is, and Wendy the same thing. I mean, it seems that when you're having fun with it, the brain really likes it. It's like this part of your brain is connected to that sort of childlike, playful side, and it needs that. It likes little games. it likes the playfulness, it likes the fun. And if you can bring those elements into this practice, it will open up. But it's like, it's a fine line. If it feels like it's in school and it has to sit down, it'll just shut off. I mean, it's a very fine line to get it to get this part of your brain to come alive.
Yeah.
We also found that shutting down the left brain also. We had to think of ways to stop the left brain getting involved.
Yeah.
So we would start talking constantly, keep the left brain occupied and just talking constantly. Or we would, you'll see in the videos, we were doing circles with our hands or tapping or whatever. And sometimes we couldn't get a color or a letter or whatever, but as soon as we started doing that, and it was like the left brain all of a sudden got occupied with what you were doing, and all of a sudden, boom, out it would come.
That's something that that's my whole theory behind contact modalities is the signal is there and it's the ability to shut the left brain down. I was going to ask you why, because you do that tapping and you're saying, tap your head, put it on your head, do this, and all these weird things. And that's where you get, like with remote viewing, that's why they give people a number rather than saying it's a target in Egypt, because the left brain is going to say, oh, I know what it is. It's the king's chamber and the king's, and the left brain starts guessing. So what you do is you distract it, or the Bankston healing method, where you get these these ego images and you flip them in your head and it sort of sends the left brain off for coffee. And I think that's what it is. The left brain, the signal is being picked up by the right brain, but you got to shut the left brain off because it's creating all this noise to stop the signal from coming through. So I'm glad. See, you guys are right on the path. Are you doing a documentary on this? Because this is fascinating stuff.
Well, we may have to in the future. We'll see. I mean, I compare this, Grant. It's like, say you're with a friend at a rock concert.
Yeah.
And it's so loud, and your friend is whispering in your ear. They could whisper all night long and you will not hear a thing.
Yeah.
But as soon as you stop the noise of the rock concert, now they're whispering directly in your ear. It's like very loud. Nothing has changed. I mean, they're still whispering in your ear.
Yeah.
So that's what Wendy and I found. If you can somehow either distract or shut the left brain off, it seems that's where the ego is. And the ego does not like to know that the other part of the brain has this ability, and it will block it out every chance it gets. It's kind of like it's saying, I'm the boss, not you. You know, you'll do as I tell you, and that means sit with your mouth shut. So it's hilarious, some of the things that we're doing to distract the left brain in order for this very weak signal to come through. And it's almost like a little kid. If you bully the little kid now will just sit as a cowering in the corner. But it's like, you've got to stop the bully. The bully is the ego. And if you can move that bully out of the way, then this little scared little child will start to peek out. It'll start to come out. It'll start to play. It'll become your friend. I mean, it's the very deepest part of you. And it's really just about practicing over and over again. And I guess, and letting this part of your brain become confident and just very practiced. And then it will keep happening for you.
Wow, that's just absolutely fascinating stuff. One of the things I noticed with the kids that they mentioned, two of them separately, and they didn't get asked about it, but they said, I can hear things a mile away. Have you looked at that sort of aspect of the hearing and not just the seeing?
Rob, you had something happen to you during the training, Rob, remember? You couldn't get the one letter?
Can you remind me, Wendy?
Okay, well, we were teaching our brains that these letters were going on, and Rob was having really difficulty with this one letter, and it was a V, but in that he had difficulty, and then he said, I just heard it.
Wow.
He heard the letter. He didn't see it, but he heard it. It's in one of the videos, Rob. Yeah. And he said, is it a V? I just heard it's a V. And we went, yeah, it is. And Nikolai said, write that down, didn't he? Because he said a lot of different stuff's going to happen to you now. Yeah.
Yes. And, he talks about interpretation. In other words, there's all this information, Grant, and the brain can interpret it in different ways. So I guess I wasn't seeing it. So maybe the auditory part of my brain gave it to me as a sound. Mm-hmm. And said, he wants this information, but it's not coming through visually, so he gave it to me at sound. I had a situation happen one time in the morning. My partner was in the bathroom off the master bedroom, and I was just coming out of sleep. So it's that, it's that time period just when you wake up, kind of in the in between.
Yeah.
And I coughed. I had a cough, but I heard it from his position in the bathroom. In other words, if it was the strangest thing, because that is like 20 feet away from where I was sleeping, but the sound I heard as I coughed was not from my ears. It was coming as if I was in the bathroom, hearing it come from the room. So it was like my consciousness was over with him at the moment, right?
Yeah.
And that was a fascinating thing too. But it all fits together. It's all part and parcel of the same thing.
Oh, same.
Wow. The people that you've trained, I've seen the people, the blind. I mean, I can't see why people wouldn't run down this road, because people have worked with blind people, where actual blind people with no eyes can actually see. Have any of the Russians worked with blind people or this sort of thing? Because to me, it would be, especially if the hearing is involved, the people who can't hear would be able to hear, the people who can't see would be able to see. And I can't see why people don't, like, to me, when I see it, I go like, wow, this is Nobel Prize stuff. It simply is. And I can't figure out why people aren't jumping on this thing.
Absolutely true, Grant. And Wendy and I talked at the beginning, it'd be pretty cool to teach blind people to read, but there's a real problem around that. They have to want to do it.
Yeah.
And we've talked to various trainers who have attempted to teach blind people.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's impossible. If a blind person is really, really, really motivated, they can do it. It's actually way easier to teach a person who had sight,
Yes.
who has gone blind, because they know what seeing is all about, and their brain can recreate that. The problem that we were told by blind people in general, it's not good to make general statements, but this is what they noticed, was that even though they might express a desire to learn, unless they're really super motivated, their deepest fears are keeping them from learning, because they're so comfortable and understand their world of being blind, that when that's threatened by the fact that you'll be able to see again, or see for the first time, it is so scary for those people, and it's so fearful at a very deep level. That's the obstacle they have to get over. It's not impossible, but it would be very cool to be able to teach blind people, but many trainers have given up and have said, unless they are actually convinced from the person themselves that they want to learn, they won't do it, because it's an exercise in frustration. They've had many parents come to them, with a blind child and say, please, 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 will you teach my child to see, and I don't mind paying whatever it costs to learn. But they have found that it's not the parents that have to be motivated, it's the person themselves. And you see, when you look at somebody that's never seen, they have no idea what colors are.
You have to start teaching them the colors. You have to start teaching them what colors are, what letters are. You have to start right from the very basics. Yeah.
So you're talking about the training. So take me through what kind of training you've done, how much time you spend every day doing this, for people to realize how long you've done this.
We've been doing it about 3 years, Rob.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's about 2.5 years now. 2.5. So we're into our 3rd year.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And how many hours a day do you work on this?
Go ahead, Wendy.
Well, I was just going to say, we were doing it. We committed ourselves in January to do it every day.
Okay.
But we were alternating back and forth. So then we decided, since we were locked down, that we would contact Nikolai and do that. So we did that for a month, 2 hours a day for a month, not including weekends. So we did that every day. And they said that if we didn't train, we would slowly go backwards. We had to keep at it, keep it active, keep going. It isn't something that just stays. If you don't use it, you lose it. So we did give it a rest. We only finished that last Friday, where we actually did read paragraphs in a magazine or in a book.
Wow.
you read out of your iPad, and they said the iPad was good because you can carry it anywhere and you can read notices and everything straight from your iPad, and that would keep it active too. And it's just a matter of closing your eyes. Now, it's totally different than with the mask, because a lot of people think that you might be peeking or anything, but I'm more interested in the consciousness side of it. I don't care whether people believe me or not.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to experience it. So yeah.
Yeah, and Grant, too, a lot of this is very specific. It's like when you work out, a lot of exercises are very specific to certain things that you do. Like I remember when I lived out west, I got tired out hiking, yet I worked out at the gym every day. And I asked my trainer, why do I get so tired hiking? He says, well, exercise is very specific. I can set you up with exercises that will train you for when you're hiking.
Yeah.
It seems that this seeing is the same way. For example, Wendy and I had learned for the past 2 years wearing a mask. Okay. With Nikolai and Marina, they wanted us to ditch the mask. Just keep your eyes closed.
Wow.
They said the reason for that is if you learn with a mask, you likely won't be able to do it if you take your mask off and close your eyes. Because the brain is totally attached to the mask. Your brain believes that, oh, this is something I can do with a mask.
Yeah.
That's the only time, you know, if I close my eyes, it doesn't work. So they said, what's the point? You can't carry your mask around with you everywhere, you know? So that's why they teach to learn with just closing your eyes. And here was the interesting part. I said to Wendy, I'm going to try, after it happened, while we were training, I tried to do it. I think Wendy, you know, we were on Skype with them and you were doing your part and I pretended I was out of view of the camera. So I put my mask on, right? I couldn't read, Grant. It was like, it was all black. It's like my deep part of my brain said, no, this is something that you do with your eyes closed, not with a mask. So it's very, very specific. And whatever it is you want to do, once again, you've got to train that exact modality.
But of course, if you're doing the documentary, then you got to do the whole thing that they do with the Band-Aids over the eyes and the mask, and it's like it's really I mean, it's really impressive when you see that kind of stuff. Can I ask, when you go into the state, for example, you say that you can close your eyes, and say if you were in a UFO situation or something and you want to zoom in, how long does it take you to get into the state? Or can you sort of be in it right away, or do you need to sort of meditate or do whatever to get into the state?
Well, you know, I think it takes probably, I would say about a half a minute or a minute. What would you say, Wendy, for you?
Yeah. Just relax. I find that, because I noticed when I was training, I would have difficulty, and then I just say to myself, relax. And a couple of times when I just said that, just relax, then everything would just open up and I'd see everything on the table. I think one of the things that blew me away were at the very beginning is when they were training Rob and I was telling myself just to relax, and everything on the table opened up and I saw my pen. And, you know, like, you don't believe it, right? Because you're seeing and you're like, okay. And then I just reached over to where I saw my pen. There it was, picked it up, and there it was. And I went, okay, I actually was totally seeing what was on the table. So, yeah.
Because we've gone all our lives not knowing about this, and we have a very fixed view of reality, when something happens beyond that, it's very difficult for the brain to believe it.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why Wendy and I made videos, because even though we were doing it, it's like I would talk to, you know, Wendy would practice and she was doing it. I saw it because I witnessed it and I held the camera to video. And later on that afternoon, Wendy would question it. And it's like, Wendy, I got video of you doing it. And the same thing would happen with me. She'd say, Rob, you were doing it. And I says, yeah, but I don't know about that. And she says, I've got video. Play the damn video. Look at it. Our ego side is so strong with our fixed beliefs that it takes a long time to bust through that and to go down that path so many times that it's now a well-worn path, Grant.
Especially our age,
That's what I also want to mention is that for people that are watching this video, I'm in my mid-60s and so is Wendy. Like, we know people.
Thanks, Rob.
I'm sorry about that. But I'm trying to motivate people,
I
right?
know, I know.
But, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Anybody.
Again, I think it comes down to that shutting down the left brain, because in contact modalities, I talk about something that neurology doesn't really want to talk about, and that's this thing about the left brain interpreter. So in the left brain, we have this thing that guesses at things. So the world becomes inconsistent, and suddenly you're seeing letters that you shouldn't be seeing, and there's like a hole in the wall. Your worldview is all collapsed, that it's not a physical world, and the left brain interpreter, which is an actual element in the left brain, just makes up something. It says, oh, it's just your imagination or whatever. And that's when you have this thing. It makes sense that if you relax, it's the idea of shutting that little voice in the left brain down, and opening up the signal and picking up the signal.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It seems like, we're in our left brain all day long. We're human. Instead of being human beings, we're human doers.
Mhm.
It's do, and think, 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 think. And, what about just being a human being where you just be? And when you just be, you can connect into all this other stuff. But when you're a human doer, it's that left brain, that ego that's trying to accomplish this, that, and the other thing. And it has no use for all the other parts of us that we really have,
Yeah.
And
that
Rob,
really do add value to the life.
Rob's very, very technical, as you know, with all his
Yeah.
cameras and all his videos and his night vision and everything. And I had to get really imaginative to shut his left brain down.
Yeah. And that would be why it regresses. If you don't practice, the left brain starts to take back control. You're in the physical world and you're doing physical things, and it just sort of blocks the signal again and takes over.
Well, yeah, and we had one time too, Grant, where I wasn't able to get the color. And we had these Bristol boards, like a Coroplast. It's that very, they're very light, right?
Yeah.
And so Wendy quietly came over and just tapped my head with it. And bing, I saw the color. So then for a while after that, when I'm there, Wendy's on the other side of the room trying to get me to see colors, I would just hold that board and tap my head with it. And once again, the left brain is so incredibly strong.
I had to laugh. The funniest time, though, was when you were sitting there trying to get colors and he couldn't get them. And so I'm there waving it, and I'm directing him where it is and everything. And I just walked up and I flicked him in the forehead a little harder than I should have. It was like, and I'm like, oh no. And he got the color right away. Not only that, I put cups in front of him with a ball in it. He got the cup and the ball. He got all kinds of letters and everything. Just from me doing that one flick, it just put him right out of his left brain, that he couldn't believe I actually did it. And then we got laughing so hard that he just went ahead and got a whole pile of stuff afterwards. So.
Well, I certainly hope you're doing a book or documenting this thing, because I mean, you're on the leading edge. I mean, you fit the mold where I think it's going, and I'm so happy that you guys are doing this, because you seem to have figured it out. And it's one thing to teach it and make money out of it or entertain people with it, but it's another thing to actually go through the work every day just to simply try to figure out what's going on and how can we make it better. And I think that's what you guys are doing, which is I'm so honored, and I hope that down the road, if you get more discoveries, that you come back on and we can talk about it again, because I can't say enough about what you guys are doing, because I think it's Nobel Prize stuff, and it's just fascinating. Where you've got videos, and let me ask you two questions. First is about your niece. Is she still in it? Because that's one of the videos I saw, the first one I saw, which went, oh yeah, these guys know what they're doing. Because you were doing the thing where she was reading the stuff and the colors, and she seemed to have it down. So where are your videos, and how can people? The Decibel will link it, but tell people, you've got a lot of videos that you've put up about the research you're doing.
Okay, so Wendy, you have a channel. It's your personal name.
Yeah, it's I have a channel. It's actually Psychic Ability CE5, because I'm into the CE5 thing too. Most of mine are unlisted.
Oh.
But, at this point, all Rob's are public. So, and they're pretty much the same ones. So yeah.
Okay, and let me just look mine up because I forget the exact name of it. I'm just quickly looking here, Grant. The name of mine is called Seeing Blindfold Practice.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
it's
just,
basically right from the very beginning, isn't it? Because what actually happened to me is when we went to our first training session, Rob found out about it and he asked me to go along. And I was sitting there, I walked in and I was sitting there and the lady said to me, immediately said to me, number one, you're not going to get it because you're too old. Also said, you just lost your husband. So for those two things, you won't get it. And you know what? I didn't. That whole training thing, I didn't. So we came home, I was frustrated, and I think it was because of what she said to me. And so we just started practicing on our own and just kind of moved forward. Yeah.
yeah, and Grant, you're asking about my niece. So she actually came in on the session when we had the lady over from Romania, and she was starting to get it. And then when the lady went back, I continued and I taught her, and she opened up very quickly because she was
Wow.
just very young.
That's an
And
impressive
I have a
video.
place in
That's very
Costa
impressive.
Rica. Yeah, and I have a place in Costa Rica, so I go down there and we'll practice a little bit when I go down there. But yes, and she comes here, we'll practice a little bit when she comes here. But you know, she's put the patches on her eyes and then the blindfold
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
and she can read. But the strange thing about it is she doesn't really care that much about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like those that can get something easily don't appreciate the value of what they have.
Yeah.
Those that work really hard to get something guard and protect the value for what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you know, you look at us where we are, and I mean, gosh, we've been at this for like 2.5 years, and we're now just starting to read.
Yeah.
And yet you get these kids that can learn in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Some can learn in 1 hour. We were teaching some of the kids up there, weren't we, Wendy? And we were teaching them in an hour.
Yeah, one of the things that totally fascinated me was when the first time I taught this little boy, and I think Liz was there too, and we were teaching him, and we kind of went, how did that go? We asked him, where are you seeing? He was seeing colors, he was seeing letters, and we said, where are you seeing? And we put it down, and he goes, I'm seeing here. And I went, what? You know?
Yeah.
So we're trying to tell him, no, bring it up here. You know, like we were novice, bring it up here. And the teacher went, no, kids can see anywhere. Kids can see their legs, their arms, they can see everywhere. So it's not just here, it's which proves it's not the brain. It's the consciousness. It can be anywhere. So, yeah.
And the kids seem to verify the fact that the left brain hasn't come online yet. So they don't have that negative, you know, left brain interpreter talking and the voice is talking and the ego and stuff like that. They're able to shut that out.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys I guess you guys have proved that you can do it with adults, and that, but you still need to shut that part of the ego down. And that's what they said about remote viewing when they asked, it was, I think it was McMonagle, the top guy, how does it work? He said, you got to shut down the ego. Simple. And it's always comes to the same sort of thing, is that's what you're in the physical world. You need that part of your brain or your consciousness. But if you want to do this kind of stuff, you've got to get out of that day-to-day world thing.
I agree 100%, Grant.
What's the future hold? What have you got some experiments you want to do or things you want to do, or you just want to get better at what you're doing?
Well, I know Wendy's interested in some of the other things. She can talk about that herself. But for me, once again, my purpose for wanting to learn this ability or this skill, this gift, whatever you want to call it, was for, you know, we're doing documentaries around the ETs, as you know, and trying to make contact and so on. And I just feel it will help me substantially for that purpose. So once again, I want to learn to see in the dark so I can see, you know, where should I be pointing my camera to?
Can I interrupt and ask you, has it helped in terms of CE5s? Are you able to sense? Because you'll hear people like Chris Bledsoe. I mean, if you heard the famous story he tells with John Alexander, where John comes there and he's describing where it happened, and they're on top of this hill above the river where the abduction thing took place. And then he says, they're here, John, they're here. And he said, how do you know they're here? I just know they're here. They're here somewhere. They're around. All of a sudden, boom, this thing appears and goes flying off. So I wondered, have you been able to sense stuff? Has it helped your CE5 world?
Well, I can tell you that I had all my equipment set up here on Saturday at the house, up
Okay.
on the deck. I've got a loft and there's a deck overlooking the river valley. And I turned my cameras and I got this round ball show up in the thermal. Now we're still vetting it through Dave at MUFON and stuff. You know, I try to debunk everything we get because
You got a left brain.
Yeah.
but there you go. I mean, it might be legit, it might not be, but you know, a lot of times I get nothing in the thermal. And how is it that after finishing this intensive month-long training on Friday, Saturday night I set up the stuff, turned the camera, and now I've got an object going across in the thermal screen for 9 minutes.
Wow.
It's like a ball for 9 minutes going across the screen. I sent it to Wendy, and we don't know. We gotta check it out further. But I'll have to get back to you on that, Grant. But that is my objective: is to fine tune it, to do this feedback loop, so I don't have to spend as much time in the field. And time that we do spend in the field, we're getting better results for sure.
Okay, and last questions. What are you doing in terms of documentaries? You're a documentary guy. You travel the world. I think that's even part of your name, your website or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's Rob Freeman, UFO World Explorer. It's really a personal passion of mine because of, you know, the sighting that I had, the 2 sightings when I was a kid. You know, we've told each other about the sightings we had when we were younger. And I'm really just checking all this out. I'm researching it out. I'm trying to make contact. We believe we did, you know, that one being in Australia. But I want to have closer contact. I want to have more continued contact. Want to get messages from them that I can share with, you know, my fellow man, messages for me. I really want to connect with the ETs. So we're just continuing to do documentaries around this, everything we're documenting, and then report back to everybody. You know, we'll be out in Vancouver and BC area. You know, you and I are planning an expedition along with Marcus, and other people are coming along potentially. So, you know, it's great to know all about this stuff. For me, it's actually getting out into the field and experiencing it directly. And of course, you know, that's a whole nother video, all the high strangeness and everything happening right around you. We could go on for hours about all this.
And what about you, Wendy? What's your ultimate goal in all of this?
Well, that's kind of how Rob and I met. I was seeing weird stuff in the sky that I didn't really understand. One night in particular, I live right by Lake Huron, right on the beach. I'm a sailor here. And I would go, right after my husband passed away, I would go down to the beach all the time, almost every night. And I was seeing these really weird lights in the sky. And a few nights, it was like fireworks. It's the only thing I could explain. It was just like fireworks in the sky. But this one night in particular, I sat there for 3 hours. And by that time, I knew this guy at that point. And I thought, there is a light out there that shouldn't be there. There's a star there that shouldn't be there. So I just sat there, enjoyed my evening, and kept an eye on this thing. And then I just decided to pack up and come home. And as I decided to do that, this light just started to move. It was sitting in the same spot for 3 hours. It started to move up to front of me, and then stopped, and then just went poof, right up over my head. And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And I was like, what was that? You know? And since I've opened up, I went to a Greer expedition right after my husband passed away. And what he told me was, because of that, I had opened right up. Like, I was seeing things, I was hearing things. And I sat and talked with Dr. Greer for quite a while about it, because I didn't understand what was happening with me. So he kind of explained it to me, and I had all kinds of weird things happen at his expedition. I had people come up to me and go, well, how can I do that? And I'm like, you really don't want to know how you can do it. But then when Rob and I started getting into this stuff, And I can't prove any of it. I'm hanging out around with a guy that wants to prove everything,
Yeah.
but I can't prove any of it. But I've had messages given to me. I sense people around me. I've had weird things happen around me, haven't I, Rob? With that one house and stuff. So I just become fascinated with it all. I can't explain everything that's happened to me. It's like the time I was down at Lawton with you at that conference, Paula's
Yep.
conference, and Rob and I went out sky watching, just the two of us, and we went out to the park.
Yeah.
And we were meditating on this rock out in the park. It must have been like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had this vision of this being appeared right in front of me, and I actually saw it reach out and touch my forehead.
Wow.
And I was flooded with energy. I flooded. I could, for about a month after the words, that energy would almost buckle my knees. That's how strong it was. And Rob kept telling me, tell them to turn it down, you know. But I've had some really freaky things happen to me. And so I just become fascinated with this. And when I'm practicing, sometimes I become fascinated with what my brain will give me, because a friend gave us some 3D pictures, like a square 3D, or like 3D. And I'd never seen that before. So Rob was on the other side. I held the picture up, and my right brain projected something in front of me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was its interpretation of the 3D. It was just a 3D block, but my brain had incorporated it differently. And I said to him, it looks like a 3D square. And Rob went, yeah, it is. And that was my first time I'd ever seen that. So it's just, I just find it so fascinating, just fascinating. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I certainly hope you do documentary and you tie into consciousness, because that's where you're at. That's what so interested me, because I've been on the consciousness thing since 2012. And in fact, that's what Greer says. You know, Greer says it's all consciousness. Consciousness is, and so he taught that to Tom DeLonge. And when Tom DeLonge goes to Lockheed Skunk Works, that's when he says, the guy says, how does it work? I just want to know, how does this thing work? And he said, I think consciousness is involved. And the head scientist at Lockheed says, now you're talking. And for 45 minutes, all he wanted to do was talk about consciousness. And I think that's a key component to the UFO mystery. Greer picked it up first, and you guys are right on the edge of this thing. And I hope you do some sort of documentary on this, because again, I think this is absolutely one of the most important stories I've ever seen. And I'm glad you guys are doing it, rather than making the money out of it or stuff like that. You're actually trying to figure out how it works. And that's all that really interests me.
Well, thank you so much, Grant, for having us on your show today, and appreciate that.
Beautiful.
And maybe one day we'll get together and I'll teach you in an hour how to see colors.
There you go. That's fascinating. And I can think of so many experiments. So let's stay in touch, because I think of all these experiments, like the thing with the shelf, and the thing of doing it in the dark. Like you have these kids, even just getting, or the one that you have to do if you do a documentary. I can't figure out who did it yet, but if you've seen some of the documentaries, these kids playing ping pong with blindfolds on. I mean, that was so impressive. It's like, yeah, you explain that, or you could almost do like a challenge, like the $10,000 challenge. Okay, you think you're speaking through the blindfold? We'll put the blindfold, $10,000, and we'll see you do what some of these people can do. It's unbelievable, and I think unbelievably important. So thanks for sharing with me, and hopefully we can stay in touch. And I'd like to know what you're doing, and I maybe give some ideas of where I'd like you to go, because you're on the same road that I'm on. Thanks.
Perfect. Absolutely, Grant.